As a smart contract security researcher, your toolbox of findings is extremely important in allowing you to uncover new and unique vulnerabilities in any type of code base, no matter what type of DeFi protocol, or even if it's an NFT protocol or anything like this. Having a bag of tricks and knobs and leverage to be able to come up with advanced attacks, or even just be familiar with things that should raise alarm bells, is something that will make a huge difference in your ability to perform in an audit. So I spent some time reviewing a set of important findings that I felt that would actually build out somebody's toolbox and help them see scenarios in which certain important findings came up that are often applicable to other code bases given in different ways, but they often come up in similar scenarios. So what I've decided to do is, of course, share this session that I gave with some security researchers live and give you guys all of these important findings and describe the scenarios and the ways that you would be able to take these and apply these to your toolbox and uncover similar findings in your own reviews. And so, of course, before we dive into the video, my name is Owen, and over 2 years ago now, I founded Guardian Audits, and ever since then we've uncovered literally over 100 different critical vulnerabilities and prevented these with security reviews. And personally, in the process of that, I've spent easily over 2,000, probably even 3,000 plus hours at this point reviewing smart contracts, and I've gotten to see our team work extra thousands and thousands of hours. And throughout that, I've seen or found many critical high, medium vulnerabilities in smart contracts. And my goal with all of the videos that I put out, and especially this one, is to share all of the learnings and the important takeaways from that time spent so that ultimately you can become a much better blockchain developer, smart contract security researcher, whatever it is you're looking to be, in a fraction of the time. So with that out of the way, let's get into this toolbox session. I thought I would share and walk through some of the important findings that we've had in the past at Guardian that I think are really good findings to understand and to be able to apply them to future code bases that you look at. And I think it's one thing to have sort of like a checklist of like, these are the things that I look for, just because I read this thing on Twitter and other people said that you should look for these things. I think that's one thing, but I think the next level of that is having actual findings that you remember and you understand explicitly how they came about, that, you know, it's sort of a much more memorable way of remembering to check for these things, because you think, oh yeah, I found this in the past, or I've seen this kind of finding come up in this exact scenario. And so you can sort of recognize when that scenario is similar in front of you, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we're going to cover, I think, 9 or 10 really, I think, like fundamental important findings that will give you guys a pretty good like toolbox of things where, you know, you might be able to recognize when things are similar to this in the future. The first finding, we're going to go key finance. So actually for key finance, I don't believe we have access. So I think the repo that had the commit that was audited is actually gone now. So we'll just talk a little bit about what the general idea here was and what the root cause of this issue was and how this applies to other systems. It's not really entirely important what their specific implementation was like, because this is more of an abstract issue that applies to a lot of different code bases. Okay, so this one says reward compounds are sandwichable. We'll just read it really quickly and then we'll talk about what we're talking about here. So there exists no fee or lockup period associated with staking to receive a portion of the rewards compounded during the big function name. A malicious actor may simply buy GMX key and stake right before the big function to immediately accrue a portion of the collected rewards that were meant to be attributed to other stakers. The malicious actor can then immediately claim these rewards, unstake, and sell GMX key after the reward compound, therefore stealing rewards from other stakers. So what does this mean? This is actually a pretty common pattern that you'll see, and it's a pretty common issue that comes with this pattern, is let's say there's some amount of value that belongs to people who have put in a stake or deposited into a vault or something like this. And the way that they share in the profits of that vault is that, it's like an ERC 4626, right? Or something like this, where you just own a portion of everything that happens. And then there's some harvest function, or, in this example, the update all rewards for transfer receiver and transfer fee function that comes right here. And if this is a dollar value on the y-axis, it stepwise increases. So when you call the function, it increases the value of the shared pot, and then it stays the same. And obviously this is time on the x-axis here. So what happens is, at this point right here, the stakers, in this example, the stakers got no rewards, but then at this point right here, the stakers had just gotten this delta of rewards. Now, the issue here is that somebody could have been staking from all the way over here, and they could have continued staking until all the way over here, and they would have gotten the same exact rewards as if somebody came in and they staked right here and they unstaked right there. And essentially what you could do is you could just sit in the mempool and wait for this function. So this is, we'll just call this compound. So you wait until you see this function in the mempool getting called by whoever is doing the compounding. You front run it and you back run it. And you have no actual exposure to the thing that's being staked, but you just basically got the rewards for that. And there's only a certain amount of rewards. So if I get rewards for something, I've stolen rewards from the person who was staking for this entire time. So essentially, if I wanted to do, like really just vampire attack all the rewards, I could deposit a huge amount. So if this guy staked 1 token, I could stake 100 tokens right here, and then unstake my 100 tokens right here, and I would get 100x the amount that he got in rewards. And I literally staked for like a single block or something like this, risk-free. I didn't have to have any exposure to the underlying asset. I could have bought the underlying asset, staked it, and then in the next transaction, gotten the rewards, and then unstaked it in the next transaction, and then sold the asset. So basically what this leads to is nobody who's actually staking, like a normal person, would actually be able to get like any non-trivial amount of fees, because MEVers would just basically MEV all the rewards and just continue to do this because it's like risk-free money. You're just taking the rewards. And so this is a really common idea that I've seen come up in a lot of different systems. So if you see a vault system or anything like this, like for example, in your guys' system, you guys have had to deal with this because what do we have that's similar to this? We have decreased position where people realize P&L, right? So if I'm a trader and I realize a loss, when a trader realizes a loss, the LPs, they get a boost, right, when the trader realizes a loss. So how do we combat that? Of course, like you guys know, we don't want to have these like stepwise increases. Instead, we account for the P&L of the trader the entire way. So it's just a smooth thing. And that way, if you do it like this, well, you've done nothing. So I think that's a valuable type of finding. Unfortunately, we can't look at the code for that one. But you guys have
the one in the perpetuals example, how would you achieve this multi-line?
Yeah, so you guys have already achieved it. So the way you achieve it is that instead of the value of the market token, or your, however you're giving people credit for depositing in liquidity, the value of their deposit, you just have to factor in the current P&L of the trader. And you guys have done that. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So that is stake 1. let's have a look at a DOS attack, and I actually have this report. Okay, cool. So we're looking at DOS dividends here. So this one is just a classic example of an unbounded for loop. It's just a good classic one to go over and understand. So let's see. What we've got here is this distribute dividends function. Now, the first thing that we'll notice when we're looking at this function is there's a for loop, and it loops over the length of the users, which whenever you see this, you should automatically know you've got you've got a DOS finding. So the length of the users, we suspect just by looking at this function, you could probably suspect that the length of this user's array is, unbounded. You can add as many users to a DeFi protocol as possible, right? You just make it a bunch of addresses. So let's have a look and see what's happening. How do we append to this user's array? So when we mint, what they're going to do is they're going to say, if the balance of the two that you're minting to is 0, then push them to this array. So I can just make a ton of addresses and mint one singular way to all these addresses and get them added to the users list. And so we can really cheaply just make this list huge, and then when they attempt to distribute the dividends to all of the users, this is going to loop like 4,000 times, or how many times I want to make it loop. We're going to try to distribute dividends to everybody, but that's not going to work. It's just going to overflow the block gas limit. So obviously we know that this is an issue. This is kind of a basic finding. I think more important to understand is the solution to this type of issue. So a recommendation here is a points per share implementation. So what we want to do, instead of calculating the rewards and like individually adding them to each user here, like explicitly doing that for every single user, and then also having to track the users, we've already implicitly got this. All the information we need is already tracked without dealing with individual users or anything like this. It's tracked in the total supply. So for any token, we have a total supply. And really what we are trying to achieve with dividends is we're trying to say, for every token in the total supply, right? So every user holds a certain amount of tokens. For every one of their tokens, we want to credit them with a certain dividend amount. That's what's happening. We're getting the amount. So this is the amount that's ultimately being distributed to everybody, and it's multiplied by their balance divided by the total supply. There's some minimum liquidity stuff. We don't need to worry about that. So they're saying I want to give this user an amount corresponding to the share of the total supply that they have. Well, a much better and easier, like just more manageable way to do this is to say, okay, so I want to distribute dividends to every single token. Let me just send what's the dividend per token that I want to send. And if I just increase the dividend per token, I've automatically given it to every user who holds total supply, and they can claim exactly the amount that corresponds to the amount of tokens that they have. So what this looks like is when somebody receives their tokens, so you mint it, they get transferred to you, or something like this. That address has a dividend per token that it received these tokens at. Right, so let's say this is 100. So this is saying that 100 tokens have already been paid out before this address received these tokens. So at this point in time, the global dividend per token is 100. So let's say time goes by, we distribute dividends. I want to give people 50, so we're going to do plus 50 dividend per token. So everybody's going to get 50. So my dividend per token was 100, but now the global is 150. So how much dividends am I owed? Dividends equal my balance times dividend per token, dividend minus position dot dividend per token. So we're accessing this 100. So what is this? Let's say my balance is 1, or let's say 10, just make it so interesting. 150 minus 100 is 10 times 50 equals 500. So you can either do this, and when you call distribute dividends, just update this one singular storage variable that applies to everybody and results in me getting 500, somebody else getting the amount that they should get, all in that one S store. Or you can do this, and you can loop over every single user, and you can calculate, okay, this was your amount. Your amount was 10. That's what I said. Oh, no, the amount, so this is the dividends distributed. Amount was 50. So you got 50 multiplied by the balance of the user, which I said was 10, divided by the total supply, which was, so here, okay, so actually the amount here is a total amount to distribute. I specified a dividend per token, so let's say this is 5,000, and the total supply was 500, which gives a dividend per token of 50. This gives a dividend per token of 50. We're going to end up with 500. Okay, so this is the total dividends distributed. This is my balance. This is the total supply. And so you're just having to do that for literally every single user, when this is the right way to do it from a smart contract perspective. So does this solution make sense to folks? I know you guys have probably seen this before, but do you guys have any questions on this?
Seems neat.
And have you guys run into this sort of design pattern before? I'm just interested.
I haven't.
Never seen before also. Me either.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so definitely when you see anything that's supposed to be distributed to holders of a token or anything like this, if there's a for loop, there's an issue. It should just use a dividend per token or a per share model or something like this. So let's have a look at port 1 in IVX.
If we want to distribute 5,000 tokens as dividends, how do we set the dividend per token?
Yeah, absolutely. So the dividend per token is a different way of giving the same information, right? So I said the total supply was 100 here. So 100 is the total supply. And then we said we want to distribute 5,000 total tokens, right? So these are the dividends. These are the tokens. So we want dividend per token. Boom. Dividend per token, 50. And then that's what we use. So this is the total dividends divided by the total tokens. Gives us the dividend per token. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
All right, cool. All right, let's check out IVX. So this is an options protocol. We don't actually have to know anything about options to understand this particular finding.
When is this repo public?
Yeah, this is actually, throw this in the chat if you guys want to have a look.
Thanks.
These are our public engagements. All right, so IVX, let's see, which one are we looking at? We're looking at port 2. So this one, incorrect approval. Now we're looking at port 1, swap margin used to game the AMM. All right, let's read it and then let's understand what's going on. So users are able to use the swap margin function to siphon funds from their portfolio well past the point of insolvency. The user can sell options contracts to the AMM and collect the premium in their portfolio immediately. Then the user can repeatedly use the swap margin function on their portfolio and sandwich themselves to extract roughly all of the value from their portfolio. The user retains their initial margin deposit as well as the premium from selling the options contracts to the AMM without having any margin remaining in their portfolio to exercise these contracts upon expiry. A malicious user can use this attack to drain nearly all of the available funds in the IVX LP contract. And then after removing the balance from their portfolio, they will then be insolvently liquidated. So what does all of that mean? Firstly, let's understand just from a high level, without touching on really any of the option stuff, what is going on with the IVX system. So we've got a contract, which is your quote unquote portfolio. This thing holds all of your margin, which can be translated to collateral. So margin equals collateral in this particular case. So let's just call it collateral. So your portfolio holds your collateral as a contract that basically manages your position in the protocol. Now, what you can do is there's a function called swap margin. So swap collateral, swap margin, that allows you to swap your collateral to a different supported collateral token. So if DAI is a supported token, and then also USDC is a supported collateral token, maybe USDC starts to depeg, there's some Silicon Valley Bank stuff going on, and I want to swap into DAI, but I still have I have positions open that use that as collateral. So how is that going to work? I would have to close the positions, get my collateral out, and then swap it, and then put it back, open those positions again. Well, that might not, that might not be the best way to do that from a user's perspective. So what I can do is I can swap that USDC, I can turn it into DAI using this swap margin function. So I would call swap margin and I would swap USDC to DAI. That's cool. It's a neat little feature that you're able to do in your portfolio. But there's a critical issue here, and we can have a look. So we require that the asset in is supported by the system as collateral, and then the asset out is supported by the system. So I can't swap from a supported collateral asset to a non-supported collateral asset. That would be very bad, because then I could immediately take all my collateral and be like, oh, this collateral doesn't actually exist, because it's been swapped into something that's not supported by the system. But so we're gonna do the swap on Uniswap. So they do get the amount out here. They're not doing any sort of validation that the amount out here is sufficient to keep the position from being liquidated. And so a really cool thing that you can do with this is I can basically, from a high level, what I can do is I can get all of the funds that I put into my position, bring it out to my address. So let's say I have address 100, that's me. I'm going to take out all my collateral. And I'm just going to leave the protocol sitting with no collateral backing my position. And I'm just going to let them insolvently liquidate me. So to get around all the options stuff, let's just think about what we could do with something like this in a perpetuals protocol. So if I had a position and the position was in a loss, so P&L equals -100, that doesn't get subtracted from my actual collateral until we decrease position and we realize that loss, right? So let's say I had 1,000 USDC collateral. Really what I should get out of this, if I close my position, everybody realizes, their losses, I should get 900 USDC, right? The P&L is going to be subtracted from my collateral. But imagine if we had, this exploit ability to say, yeah, I see that I'm in negative 100 P&L. I'm just going to retract all of my collateral and just take that all back. So I'm just going to send myself 1,000 USDC collateral, and the system can just hold my bags for me, and they'll cover my losses. So then you could essentially do this and say open a position. If you do make losses, then just take your collateral back and don't actually experience those losses. Or if you experience gain, then realize the gain and actually close the position the right way. So then it's like a win-win scenario. Like even if you lose money, you don't actually lose the money, you just get the collateral back. And if you make money, then you actually make money. So this is a terrible situation, right? I'm able to just literally withdraw my collateral without going through the actual means of decreasing my position and realizing that. So how am I able to withdraw the collateral from the portfolio? Well, like we said, they have to swap on Uniswap with a artificially supplied amount out. It's not determined by the protocol, it's determined by who is calling this. And it's only margin user, so it's the owner of this account, so it's me. I'm calling swap margin. I'm specifying the amount out that I'm willing to accept in slippage. So what happens if I basically give amount out of 0 and then front run myself on the exact same Uniswap pool and just extract that value from my swap and do that over and over and over again? I can do this in a loop until basically 99% of my collateral has been effectively removed from my portfolio. And so the solution to this is to add just a simple check afterwards. If they would just add like a is liquidatable. If the position is liquidatable after the swap, then revert and don't let you make your position liquidatable. Does this make sense? What kind of questions do you guys have based on this? This finding is actually somewhat similar to what happened to Euler Finance. Somewhat. Yeah, because they had something like a donate function. And the donate function would just allow you to basically do this, except you weren't able to retrieve it back to your address. You were able to donate it to the protocol, but then what you could do is you could liquidate your own position in the same transaction and get like the 10% liquidator fee or whatever percentage liquidator fee from it. And there was a way to basically make a really artificially leveraged position and then cause it to be liquidatable in the same transaction. And then, yeah, with using a flash loan, yeah, it was really a beautiful attack, but it's somewhat similar to that in the sense that here's the heuristic to take away from Euler Finance and this exploit is, can the user voice their own position into a liquidatable state? Usually that is going to, being combined with some other features of the protocol, that's going to be a really bad issue. So never allowing the user to force their position to become liquidatable. So next up, we're going to have a look at some GMX findings. So this will be relevant to what you guys are doing with your perpetuals. So we've got, I think this one, it's like 10 of these reports now. So we're going to look at this report and look at some interesting findings from this one. Okay, let's have a look at Ordo1, Unbounded swamp path length. So we're going to look at some gas manipulation findings. Okay, so we'll read it, we'll go and look at the code base, and then we'll come back and we'll read it again. So when creating an order, there is no validation that the swap path is under a certain max length. This allows malicious users to create risk-free trades on the exchange. So among other ways, a trader can submit a market increase order with a swap path that puts the order just over the block gas limit when combined with a callback that consumes nearly the entire max callback gas limit. Then when the trader wishes the trade to be executed using outdated prices, they can toggle the callback contract to only consume a very small amount of gas, enabling the order to be executed and recorded in a block. So there's a few pieces that come together here. First, we'll discuss the crux of the issue, and then we'll understand how we made it to be something that was a pretty straightforward critical exploit. So here we are in the GMX system. Let's have a look at create order. Ignoring all of this, orders have a swap path. Now we'll notice that there is now a validate swap path function. And in the validate swap path function, we validate the swap path is below a certain length. So it's not above, like, I don't know, they said like 3 swaps or something like this. There used to be no validation on the length of the swap path. And so what this meant is that I could create an order that has a swap path that looks like this. It could be ETH to USDC, USDC to Bitcoin. It could be then Bitcoin to DAI to Doge, Doge to ETH, and it could just go on and on and on. And you could provide literally hundreds, infinite amount of different swaps that you want it to happen. And obviously we can't do that in a single transaction. You can't process infinite swaps, we run out of gas. So how did that become an issue in the system? How did expending a ton of gas become an issue? Well, we have to understand, first of all, how does the pricing and order execution work in a system like GMX v2? So if we draw a timeline here, we draw a little bit of a better line. All right, that one's arguably worse. All right, we'll deal with it. So if I create an order request to increase position, it could be a request to decrease the position, but we'll say in our example, we're going to try to increase the position. So unlike in your systems, GMX has this idea of orders. An order is the request to call a function like increase position size or increase position collateral, or if you have just a general increase position function, instead of users just being able to call that function directly, they're able to create an order, and then the keeper will execute their order in a separate block in a separate transaction, and that is what will actually end up in their position getting created or increased in size or decreased in size or closed or anything like this. So first of all, why do they have this two-step action, right? So why is it such that to create a position, I have to create a increase position order, and then after I've done that, we have to wait for the keeper to execute order my order ID. Why do we have to have this sort of setup? So this is to address front running. Why is front running an issue in the system? So there are a number of things that I could front run somebody's increase position call and give them, a few bad outcomes because of that. So if I see in the mempool that John wants to increase his position size by $100 and he is long, I know that the longs are about to increase by $100. Now, if the current market balance of longs versus shorts is let's say $1,000 to $900. So $1,000 long, or let's say $900 long, 1,000 short. John's increase is going to take the balance of longs versus shorts to $1,000 versus $1,000. This is good. This is good for the protocol. The protocol wants longs and shorts to be balanced because it basically, for the LPs, it's basically saying that, hey, price goes up, we don't care. Price goes down, we don't care. We're just collecting fees on these traders from liquidations and borrowing fees and things like this. So the protocol wants these two things to be balanced. So the protocol rewards John for balancing longs and shorts. It gives him a positive price impact. So this is kind of like on Uniswap. If you have negative, you have just price impact in general, you're getting a worse price, right? On Uniswap, you don't really have the notion of swapping stuff and getting a better price if I swap, unless I'm like front running somebody and you think about it that way. But John's going to get a positive price impact, so he's going to get like plus X dollars on his position. So they're actually going to give him a more favorable price since he's doing something good for the exchange. If John were to do something bad for the exchange, so he's going to unbalance that balance of longs and shorts, he's going to get a negative price impact. And so you can probably see that if I were to front run John, and let's say Alice front runs John and increases a position for $100, now Alice gets the positive price impact. She gets that plus X amount of dollars. Now John's increase gets executed. He takes the balance of longs versus shorts from 1,000 and 1,000, right? Because Alice brought them from 900 versus 1,000 to 1,000 versus 1,000. She balanced it and she got rewarded for that. So John comes in, now he just got front run. So now he's doing a transition from 1,000 to 1,100, 1,000. This is bad for the protocol, right? The protocol wants them to be balanced, and now John just unbalanced them. So now John gets a negative price impact. So Alice got this positive price impact at John's expense. So that's probably the main reason why front running is a bad thing on this protocol, right? If I see that somebody's gonna get positively price impacted, just front run them and basically take their positive price impact and cause them to get negatively impacted. And you could even do this in such a way where it might even cause positions to be in a more liquidatable state, and you could actually cause people to get liquidated because of this, and that would be a huge issue. So that's why we have the two-step approach. Now, the two-step approach now means that we have a few attack vectors. When I create my increased position order, I get the prices from the block in which I create that thing. Get prices from this block. So if the keeper was delayed, they're not going to penalize you and say, well, the keeper executed this order in block 2, so you're going to get the prices from block 2. They don't say that. They say you created your order in block 0, so you're going to get the prices from block 0. So if the price of ETH was $1,000 in block 0, the price that you're going to get executed at is $1,000, even if when you get executed in block 2, the price of ETH is actually $1,100. So that means at this block 2, I'm getting a really good deal. If I can see that now Ether is $1,100, but my order was created in block 0, where the price was $1,000, and I'm getting that execution price of $1,000 when Ether currently is worth $1,100. So in this particular scenario, what I can do is I can just close my position and realize profit immediately because the price of ETH is literally higher than my cost. So I've immediately got P&L profit because of this. So why is this not an issue like every time, right? Why is this not an issue? It's not an issue because the latency of the oracle is really quite small. So for example, on Arbitrum, it might be a few seconds between when the order gets created and the order gets executed. So really what this might look like is, price might move like a fraction of a cent or something, or a few, maybe at most a couple cents between the execution. And there's actually a period of time where they don't allow you to cancel your orders within a certain time frame. So you can't make like really small scale, short term risk-free trades or anything like that. But we're going to leverage this swap path of unbounded length. We're going to leverage this thing to make this little feature actually a huge issue. So how are we going to do that? We're interested in this transaction here. This is a execute order transaction. This was our create order transaction. This is where we created it. This was called by us. This is called by the keeper. So the keeper will just execute this thing as soon as it can, right? So we're going to assume we're creating a market order. So it's just going to try to execute this thing as soon as possible. Now, what if I can cause this to revert? Well, if I can make this transaction, this execute order transaction revert, then the keeper is not going to execute it, right? They can't. The transaction literally can't be recorded in the block. So what if I can make this thing revert, like throughout time? So as time increases, the state of that transaction is that when you try to execute it, it still reverts all the way until we get to some time over here, which is no longer block 2, maybe it's block 100. So a significant amount of time has passed between when I created my order and where we are now. So now, what if I'm able to flip the switch and say, okay, we're in block 100. I'm looking at the prices. I originally opened my position when Ether was $1,000. At this time, Ether is worth $2,000. So I've watched Ether literally double in price. While I have this order banked here, I have no position open, but I have an order to open a position at a cost basis of $1,000. So I now see, okay, ETH is at $2,000. If I let this execute order function go through and I allow my position to be opened at a cost basis of $1,000, I'm going to be immediately 100% profit. So I doubled my money on the size that I opened. So that's a pretty good deal. I'll take that. Like I know, like immediately, no risk, immediate 100% gain. So I'm going to make this pass. It's not going to revert. And now the keeper is able to execute my order. and the keeper will execute my order. We'll get the cost basis of $1,000. These are the prices from the block in which I created my order. Only the current price of Ether is $2,000. So right after my position gets opened, let's say, in the very next block, right here, I do a decrease position. Well, really what I would do is I would do create order. So what I would do is I would do create order. It would be for, a decrease. Here's my position ID. And then in the next block after that, or, some blocks later, the keeper executes me. They're going to use the prices from here. So I'm going to get decreased at a cost basis of $2,000. So when we execute order for my decrease, realize 100% gain, and that is what we call a risk-free trade. So there's two important features that we just talked about to make that thing happen. There was, first of all, when we were back here, we had to make this thing revert. So we had to figure out some way to make this transaction revert. And then, second to that, we need a way to flip the switch in the future. So if I see that the price of ETH doubled, I need to have the ability to say, okay, the prices are in my favor. Now I want this to pass, and now I want it to go through, just like that. So we're going to use this swap path to give us those two things. So first of all, a way to revert. Well, we've got that. If the swap path is just humongous, it's like 1,000 elements long, well, that's just not possible to execute in a single transaction. It's going to be more than the block gas limit. So what we do is we just provide a really long swap path. That's how we achieve the initial, okay, we get this thing to revert. Now the challenge is, how can I turn it back on? How do I make it so that this thing is actually able to pass and I'm able to realize my sort of like risk-free trade and let the keeper execute this transaction when I want them to? And the solution that we had for this is we want to not just make this swap path super long, we want to engineer it to be really long, but just exactly precisely as long as we need it to be, so that it gets exactly right up to the block gas limit. So it could be, I think it was something like, they were like 12, it was like, I don't know, I don't remember the exact length, but it's long, but it's not like crazy long. We just need this thing to get really right up close to the block gas limit. So maybe if the block gas limit on Avalanche, for example, I believe at the time it was like 8 million. I think it was 8 million. So what if as is, it was 8 million and 10 gas or something like that? In reality, it was like, 8,050,000, something like that. Then what if I can change something about the transaction environment of my order so that instead of this thing taking 8,050,000, now it takes like 7,950,000. That's less than the block gas limit. That can actually be executed. So what we were able to do is we were able to use the callbacks, which we won't go too much into detail on. Just make the callback contract expend 100,000 less gas, and you can control that because you can control the callback contract, whatever it's going to do.
So one thing I'm looking at is that it is possible that the gas limit is different from block to block, right? So was there a way to do this attack very deterministic, meaning that it would basically succeed every time, or was it like always a little bit of risk involved for the attacker as well? That like now we did a callback contract that was not close enough to the gas limit, basically, and yeah, it just passed. Or how did it look?
Yeah, it's a very good point. So really the callback gas limit, I don't know if we mentioned it here, but the actual magnitude of gas that you're able to expend with the callback is actually a million gas. So it's actually quite severe. So instead of doing like a swing like this, you could do a swing like from 8,500,000 to 7,500,000 or whatever like that. And that we found was a large enough swing that it's actually pretty safe. Like you're pretty certain that the block estimate's going to be within this million range.
So when you value a vulnerability like this, do you use some kind of like severity likelihood graph to kind of rate them, or how do you think? Do you use like I think they are called like what do you say? I know that there's like some examples, like Immunify has their examples of this is a critical, and you kind of just, I guess, intuitively know if it's a critical or not, or do you kind of do like more of a analysis of, I don't know, cohorts to severity and likelihood, for example?
Yeah, I've seen those charts that are like what they have like likelihood, impact, and they've got like the boxes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I've considered switching to this, maybe in the future, but we actually don't use something like that. I do think that that's like helpful. I would actually lean more towards it kind of just comes with intuition. So I guess the reasoning for this one being a critical exploit is the fact that I can manipulate the exchange to guarantee that I'm going to get profit. So that could be basically extrapolated out, and you could think the worst case, if I were to do this on a large scale, then I could just drain the LPs, right? Because I'm just always making profit. So effectively, you can just game the protocol, game the logic of the protocol in order to drain the LPs and get an unfair advantage. And there's a large economic incentive to do so because you're making like risk-free money. Yeah, so there's no like formal like analysis of things like that. And yeah, I mean, of course, with our model, like it depends on the client. It's definitely possible that some clients would argue on vulnerability rankings or anything like that, but we we haven't had any issues like that with the GMX team. And I think something important to note on that is that we always try to come with a POC. So actually, we can have a look at the POC for this one. So this will be useful for the POCs that you guys have to write. Take a look at this. Okay, so let's have a look. Test, Guardian, POCs. So here's all the POCs we did for this engagement. So you can see like we POC pretty much every critical and high vulnerability. Okay, so for example, here we're making like a really long swap path that's a very particular length. Looks like it's 63. Oh yeah, and the callback gas limit was actually 2 million. So I thought it was 1 million, it's actually 2 million. So there's even larger of a window. So we made it 1.9 million for whatever reason. And yeah, so here's basically, we created an order and then you execute the order and you see that it reverts. This is because it runs out of gas. Now you wait 50 blocks or something like this. And on your attack contract, this is the callback contract, you flip a switch that makes it consume like roughly 2 million less gas. And then now you can execute the order and you get basically a risk-free profit after this. And then you can decrease your position to a market decrease and realize that profit. And so we realized $100,000 of profit without risking any capital. So at any point we could have just canceled the order and gotten our money back, or we allow it to execute and we make 100 grand. So yeah, I think with our rankings, we really try to like be as explicit as possible with POCs for everything. All right, so that one was a long one. Do you guys have any questions? What parts about that should we explain better or anything like that?
Would this attack fall under gas griefing, especially? I think I've seen a few of these where you rely on revert, and then you kind of want to flip the switch to make it not revert when it's beneficial.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think we called it, gas manipulation, gas griefing. Gas griefing has, I guess, a few connotations, so we decided to just call it gas manipulation. So using gas to manipulate the system. But yeah, exactly. All right, cool. We're gonna go over, I think we'll do one more. I think this one is, this one is important. All right, cool. This one will be a bit simpler, not nearly as involved with the actual architecture of the GMX system. But this one has to do with blacklisted addresses. When I thought of this one, I was actually thinking of a much more complicated attack, and then this ended up being like the thing that enabled that attack. I was looking for something to enable the attack, and I couldn't think of anything. And then it was this blacklisted addresses, and then I realized, blacklisted addresses are just a much more simpler issue on the exchange. And I had never considered that blacklisted addresses could be sort of like an attack vector before. But now, since I've thought of that, I actually realized like this is an extremely useful tool to have. And I think we've found a number of issues in other protocols that stem from the same root cause of a blacklisted address. So the reason blacklisted addresses are so great for finding like unexpected edge cases or things like this is because whenever people make a transfer for an ERC20 token, they always expect it to work. And that's reasonable. Like, there's really not a whole lot of ways that it would fail. You could run out of gas, or if there's callbacks, maybe the callback could fail. But in most scenarios, you're going to have enough gas. It's not going to be a token with callbacks or anything like this. So it's not like transferring Ether, where transferring Ether can easily fail if the contract doesn't implement a receive function or a fallback function, or maybe the contract just chooses to revert maliciously or anything like that. When you're transferring an ERC20 token, you're interacting with the token contract itself. And of course, you probably trust that contract. So you're not expecting any sort of reverts. But of course, if the address that you're transferring to is blacklisted for that token, then it's going to revert. And this causes a great deal of issues, especially when you have protocols that need to liquidate positions in a timely manner. Well, if I can prevent that liquidation from occurring by making you attempt to transfer a token to a blacklisted address, then you essentially can't liquidate my position. That's a huge issue. And so USDC is probably the most popular token that has a blacklist. And I think at this point there are 200 or so addresses that are blacklisted across all different chains for USDC. So of course it's rare to have a blacklisted address, but you might not need to have access to that blacklisted address. You just need that blacklisted address to exist. So once a blacklisted address exists, you can just point the system at it and say, hey, try to transfer tokens to this thing, and then it can't. So here's how that affected the GMX system, and you can also apply this to many other systems. Like we said, in many DeFi systems, there's some sort of liquidation functionality, right? Like I would honestly wager that in like 75% of DeFi systems, you're going to find a liquidate function. And honestly, like this might be a free, like high finding in a lot of contests, is honestly just thinking about blacklisted addresses. Can I stop a liquidation with a blacklisted address? So let me just read this really quickly. So addresses that are blacklisted for popular ERC20 tokens such as USDC can be leveraged to exploit the exchange in a number of ways. These addresses cannot be liquidated in any case where they would be transferred back a leftover collateral amount in a token which they are blacklisted for. Among other ways, blacklisted addresses can execute risk-free trades using market increase orders in the following way. Force a collateral swap to fail via low liquidity in a niche market, The order cannot be canceled since the cancellation would attempt to send the token that the user is blacklisted for. Therefore, the order will remain in the data store until the liquidity is added, deposit liquidity into the low liquidity market, and then now it can go through and you can execute a risk-free trade. So we're not going to focus too much on the risk-free trade aspect of this because that's not going to apply to the vast majority of systems. But we'll look at the liquidation case. What we'll do is we'll draw out. You could even think about this. I'm sure I honestly might have just given each of you guys a free finding for week 3. This might be an issue in a lot of the code bases that you guys are reviewing this week. Let's say this is the P&L. Here's the P&L on the y-axis, and then we've got time down here. Let's say this is break-even P&L, and then this is negative $500 of P&L, so you've lost $500. And let's say your position has $500 of USDC collateral. There's your collateral, $500 of USDC. And let's say the position size is $10,000. And max leverage is 20x. So we're right at max leverage. 20 times 500 is $10,000. So we are literally the maximum leverage we can be. If we lose a single dollar, we're going to be in a liquidatable state. So there's an entire range here. We'll draw a red line where we are liquidatable but solvent. So what does this mean? This means that if my position, here's my P&L, maybe I make some money in the start and then I start to lose money, it goes down, and then boom, I lose a singular dollar, or even just a cent, and now I'm liquidatable, but I'm solvent. Solvent just means, the definition I'm using for solvent here is, can I cover my losses? So when I go $1 into loss, my effective collateral becomes $499, which means my max leverage becomes greater than 20x. And so while we're in here, in this range, we can be liquidated, and we should be liquidated. Ideally, we're liquidated right there as soon as we cross. But since we're blacklisted for the collateral token, we can't be liquidated in this range. Why is that? It's because, let's say my loss here, at this point in time, I had lost $250 in P&L. So $250, that goes to the protocol, to the 2 LPers. And then my original collateral minus that $250 equals $250. That goes to me. So I get paid out $250 from what was remaining from my collateral. Well, if I'm blacklisted for my collateral token, then this transfer here of this remaining amount, $250, is going to revert. So at this point, if they try to liquidate me, they can't. The liquidate transaction reverts. So I can continue to have a position in the liquidatable state, and I can only become liquidatable if it crosses the threshold here. And now, as soon as I go below $500 in losses, now I'm insolvently liquidatable. $500, that's the max that they can get, because I only gave them $500 of collateral. That goes to the LPers, and then $500 minus $500, which is what I paid to the LPers, equals 0, transferred to me. So there's no transfer. Now they can liquidate, only when I'm insolvent. But the whole point of liquidation is to avoid these insolvent positions. And so we've effectively negated this whole range, this whole safety boundary before positions hit insolvency. We've negated all of that, and now positions can go insolvent and get liquidated and cause a loss for the LPers. So does this consequence make sense? Does this graph make sense?
Yes. But one thing about the liquidators, there won't be any liquidation fee. So no incentive to liquidate this kind of insolvent position.
Yeah, exactly. So then at that point, maybe the protocol should step in, and the protocol should liquidate, or the LPs will have an incentive to liquidate, since if the position continues to lose money, the LPs are losing out on that, right? Since we're going increasingly insolvent. So the LPs have a bit of an incentive to call that liquidate function and get that thing closed so they don't continue to lose.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
But yeah, interestingly, actually in the GMX V2 system, it's funny because there is no liquidation fee. And that's one thing that we had pointed out, but their liquidations are, they're not sort of decentralized where anybody can call them. They have a liquidation keeper. And so the protocol is entirely responsible for liquidating insolvent positions. But yeah, definitely if you find a system that has a liquidation fee and you can get this same sort of blacklisted issue, like this blacklisted issue, you could almost copy paste this to a lot of different DeFi protocols. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. Can you explain to me what the blacklisted part is? Because I guess I'm missing that part.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so let's check out USDC contract. Let's have a look at the actual USDC contract.
I can also mention a bit what Reda said. I think there was one Codogs competition that was if the system is set up in a way, now GMX seem to be different, but if the system is set up in a way where the incentives for liquidating a position does not exist, then that also could be a high or a medium finding, because you're basically having a lot of like these dust positions, and that is gonna make the LPs like have a lot of losses eventually, because you have a lot of these dust positions basically.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. If that incentive doesn't exist or it's not correctly enforced, 100%, that's a huge issue, right? And I would say, I mean, obviously, depending on the protocol, it's probably a high, could be critical, depends on the outcomes, right? So, yeah. Okay, so going back to the USDC contract here. So I pulled up the implementation and we can see we've got this is blacklisted thing here. So let's check out and let's actually read the code for USDC and we'll see where that's used. So we'll go all the way to the bottom so we can actually get to the interesting stuff. So fiat token V2, this is basically the USD contract. So they inherit from fiat token V2 and fiat token V2 underscore 1, aptly named, is the USDC contract. So they got some initialized stuff, and it looks like actually what they do is they have blacklisted this address. So they've blacklisted the contract for USDC itself. So right out of the gate on any chain, you're going to have a blacklisted address. But basically what blacklist does is if we find the, actually let me just open this in, they've got a nice VS Code thing. All right, here we go. So I'm going to search for blacklisted. So there's a blacklistable that it inherits from. So somebody has the permission to blacklist people. There's a way to check if an account is blacklisted. You can blacklist an account, so set that mapping to true. You can unblacklist somebody. Let's see. So here's where the blacklist comes into effect. You can't mint. Okay, well, we're not really. If you have the power to mint USDC, then that's pretty cool. But let's go to the transfer. Okay, so transfer from. So when you're transferring from, you can't call this thing if you're blacklisted. You can't transfer from a blacklisted account, and you can't transfer to a blacklisted account. All of these things will revert if you're blacklisted in that mapping. Now, if you transfer, you can't call the transfer function if you're blacklisted, and you can't receive the transfer amount if you're blacklisted. So any interaction with a blacklisted account for USDC will revert. So that's where we get the idea of we can cause this transaction to fail because we're going to attempt to transfer to a blacklisted account, and that will cause the whole transaction to revert. Does that clear that up?
Yes, thank you. I got it. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. And USDC is just probably the most popular token that has a blacklist, but of course, many centralized tokens like that could have a blacklist. All right, cool. Any other questions based on that?
What's the vulnerability that you're most proud of to find?
That's a good question. The one that I'm most proud of, it might be on this report. I think it is, let's see. I'm not gonna fully go through that because I don't want to bore you guys. But yeah, this one actually, you know what we could do? We could just watch the video. So there's a video that comes with this one. Great, so this is IPU1. And to first get an understanding of this exploit, we're going to first establish that we have a limit increase for a long, and we're going to set the trigger price to be just 5,000 for Ether. And so, of course, this is going to have, 12 zeros of precision here to get Ether back down to 18 in the system. And that's our trigger price. And we're going to abuse this by providing a size delta USD that is actually just one way less than the trigger price. So what we do is we provide a size delta USD that is actually 4999 followed by 12 zeros. So it is literally one way less than the trigger price. And we're going to denote this as S. And we're going to leverage this to enable a risk-free trade where we can decide when this limit increase is going to be able to be executed. So what we'll do is draw out a timeline here. And so we'll draw our trigger price on the timeline. Looks like this. And then we have our S right up next to it, right up below it. And it is literally one way below the trigger price. And so we have a limit increase long. So for that to get triggered, price action is going to have to look something like this, right? So we know that the only valid range here is some subset of something like this range here to execute this order. And particularly, if we go ahead and look at the set exact order price function, and we come down here to should validate ascending price, the false case, which applies to our limit increase for our long, we're going to set the trigger price as the max price, as the latest price is going down to the latest price is here. So this is our min, and then our trigger price, which is right here, this is our max. So our trigger price is our max. And then when we get the execution price, we are going to use the max price because it is an increase and it is long. We're going to pick the max price, which is going to, of course, be our trigger price. And then we're going to apply price impact from there based off of the trigger price. And then we'll just have a non-restrictive acceptable price that's somewhere up here. And so what we're able to do is we're able to control the direction that price moves from here based on price impact. So of course, negative price impact would move this up, positive price impact would move this down. So this is positive price impact and this is negative price impact, and it moves from this point right here, which is our trigger price. So one important thing to note is that when we have a size that is literally one way, and I made a slight mistake, these are actually all nines, a size that is literally one way less than our trigger price, then if we go ahead and look at increased position utils on this line, number 110, we calculate the size delta in tokens, and will be subject to truncation by the division here by the execution price. And so this value that is literally one way less than the trigger price will get rounded to 0, and our size delta in tokens will of course be 0. We will set the position size in tokens to be 0, and then when we validate position, we will revert with an empty position error. And so this way, until we are positively price impacted by at least one way, so positively price impacted at all, the order will revert with an empty position error, e.g. the order will not be executed. And so what an attacker can do is they can open such a limit increase in some niche market that has relatively low open interest, not a lot of trading volume, and they could basically control the open interest and easily manipulate it in such a way where when they want this order to not go through, they leave the balance of open interest in such a way where this limit increase is negatively impacted. And then as soon as they want their order to go through, perhaps prices have reached this level here, then they can all of a sudden change the open interest balance in the market in such a way that will positively price impact their limit increase order and move the execution price down at least one way to where it is at least equal to this size delta amount or less than, basically just to the point where this will not get rounded down to 0. And then it will no longer revert with an empty position error when we validate the position. And so an attacker can really leverage this by utilizing the swap path for the increase order and using a very large initial collateral delta amount that could be magnitudes larger than whatever capital was necessary to sort of rig the open interest in the niche, low liquidity, low trading volume market that they chose to manipulate. In this way, a trader can get outdated prices to execute their swap path with their humongous amount of initial collateral delta amount.
And how long did it take for you to find it?
That one, I mean, I guess if you factor in all the months of understanding the code base, a few months, probably 3 months of having looked at the code base before, and then in that specific review, we had to spend a couple of weeks at that point.
Then.
Yeah, that's why I don't really trust any DeFi. All right, fantastic. I hope that session was useful. We went over a lot of interesting edge cases and honestly some pretty niche ones that a lot of people don't actually know about or they're not commonly known in today's security landscape. So I hope you can take some of these and actually go and apply them to, first of all, your findings toolbox. So you've got a bag of things that you can sort of reach into when you see something that's similar to one of these scenarios we went over. And hopefully you can find some of these issues in code bases that you review. So with that being said, if you are interested in becoming a top tier security researcher or a senior security researcher, some might say, in a matter of months, then you can go in the description below. And I actually put together my guide to becoming a senior security researcher in 6 months. There are 6 steps there to go through and actually become a senior security researcher and be able to skip a lot of the trial and error that I personally had to go through and do the right things the first time in order to get there in just, a matter of months instead of years. And finally, of course, if you're really interested in this security stuff and you want to connect with people from across the world and discuss security or even go and find folks to team up and compete in public contests with, then you can go ahead and join the Solidity Lab. This is a free community that we have created at Guardian, and you can apply to join at lab.guardianaudits.com. All right, that is all for this time, and I'll see you in the next one.